When I first met Sarah, it felt like a scene from one of those overly dramatic rom-coms. You know the kind, the ones where the guy bumps into the girl at a coffee shop, spills her latte, and offers to buy her a new one while their eyes meet and the music swells. Except, in our case, it wasn't coffee. It was a mutual friend's barbecue, and instead of a latte, it was a spilled plate of ribs that led to our first conversation. I apologized profusely, and she laughed it off, saying she'd always been more of a vegetarian anyway. That laugh, bright and effortless, was the beginning of what I thought was the love of my life. We clicked instantly. Sarah was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. She was smart, funny, ambitious, and had this infectious energy that made everyone around her feel like they mattered. We started dating soon after that barbecue, and within months, I was head over heels. It wasn't just her beauty or her charm, it was the way she made me feel. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Truly seen. Over the next few years, our relationship blossomed. We moved in together, adopted a rescue dog named Max, and spent countless weekends exploring new hiking trails or binge-watching shows on Netflix. She'd often talk about our future together, the house we'd buy, the kids we'd have, the trips we'd take. I'd never been the kind of guy to think too far ahead, but with Sarah, it all felt so easy, so natural. When I proposed, it was a culmination of everything we had built together. I took her to the spot where we had our first date, a cozy little park overlooking the city. As the sun set, I got down on one knee and asked her to marry me. She said yes before I could even finish my speech, tears streaming down her face as she threw her arms around me. It was perfect. She was perfect. The months leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of planning and excitement. Sarah wanted a destination wedding, something intimate and special. We settled on a small villa in Tuscany, surrounded by rolling hills and vineyards. It was everything we had dreamed of and more. Our families and closest friends flew in, and for a week, we celebrated our love in one of the most beautiful places on earth. On the day of the wedding, I remember standing at the altar, watching her walk down the aisle. She looked stunning, her white dress flowing like a river of silk, her smile radiant enough to light up the entire villa. As she approached, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. How had I gotten so lucky? What had I done to deserve someone like her? We had written our own vows, and as she recited hers, I was struck by how heartfelt and sincere they sounded. She spoke about our journey together, about the life we were about to build, and about how I was her rock, her safe place. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. My own vows felt inadequate in comparison, but when I looked into her eyes, I knew she understood. Words were just words. What mattered was the love we shared. The reception was a blur of laughter, dancing, and toasts. Our friends and family took turns sharing stories about us, painting a picture of a couple deeply in love and destined for a lifetime of happiness. Sarah was the life of the party, moving from table to table, making everyone feel special. As the night went on, we snuck away for a quiet moment under the stars. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I can't wait to spend forever with you." I believed her. Every word. After the wedding, we spent 2 weeks honeymooning along the Amalfi Coast. It was pure bliss. We swam in crystal-clear waters, sipped wine on sun-drenched terraces, and talked for hours about our dreams and plans. She was as affectionate and attentive as ever, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in a dream. A perfect, beautiful dream. But dreams have a way of masking reality, don't they? Looking back, there were signs, small, almost imperceptible cracks in the facade. Like the way she'd occasionally zone out during our conversations or the brief moments of hesitation when we talked about the future. At the time, I brushed them off as wedding stress or post-honeymoon blues. After all, no one's perfect, right? It wasn't until we returned home that things started to feel off. Sarah, who had always been so warm and open, began to pull away. At first, it was subtle. She'd come home late from work more often, citing networking events or last-minute meetings. She'd seem distracted, her phone always just out of reach. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself she was just adjusting to married life, that she needed time to settle back into our routine. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. And as much as I tried to ignore it, it began to grow. Still, in those early days, I clung to the memories of our wedding, to the promises we had made. I told myself that whatever was going on, we could work through it. Because that's what love is, isn't it? It's not just the grand gestures or the fairy tale moments. It's the commitment to stand by each other, even when things get hard. Especially when things get hard. I had no way of knowing just how hard things were about to get. The first few weeks after the honeymoon felt like a dream I didn't want to wake from. Sarah and I settled back into our routines, the glow of our wedding and the Amalfi Coast still fresh in my mind. I was optimistic, ready to start our new life together. But it wasn't long before that glow began to dim. At first, it was little things. Sarah seemed distracted during dinner, her phone buzzing more often than usual. When I'd ask about her day, her responses were vague and hurried, as though she couldn't be bothered to fill me in. "Just work stuff," she'd say, brushing it off with a dismissive wave of her hand. I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, marriage didn't mean our lives would be perfect. Everyone had bad days. But as the weeks turned into months, her behavior grew harder to ignore. Sarah started working late more often than not. "Networking events," she'd say, or last-minute projects. She'd come home hours after dinner, exhausted and distant. Sometimes she wouldn't come home at all until well past midnight, claiming she'd fallen asleep at a coworker's house after working late. When I'd express concern, she'd laugh it off. "You're overthinking it," she'd say. "This is just how it is in my line of work." But it wasn't just the late nights. Sarah's warmth, the thing that had drawn me to her in the first place, seemed to vanish. She no longer reached for my hand during car rides or curled up next to me on the couch. Conversations that used to flow so easily became stilted, filled with awkward silences and forced smiles. She started sleeping with her phone tucked under her pillow, a habit she'd never had before. When I asked about it, she claimed it was to keep her alarm close, but something about her tone felt off. I tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut, the little voice that whispered that something wasn't right. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust her. After all, she was my wife, the woman I'd vowed to spend the rest of my life with. So, I did what I thought was right. I focused on being a better husband. Maybe she was stressed from work, I reasoned. Maybe I wasn't doing enough to support her. I started cooking dinner more often, planning date nights, leaving little notes in her bag to remind her how much I loved her. But no matter what I did, it never seemed to be enough. She'd thank me with a distracted smile, but her eyes never quite met mine. It was as though she was somewhere else entirely, a place I couldn't reach. One night, after another late return home, I finally mustered the courage to ask her directly. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me, "is everything okay?" She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Of course," she replied. "Why wouldn't it be? You've just been different lately," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Distant. I feel like we're not connecting the way we used to." Her response was immediate. "I'm fine," she said, almost too quickly. "Work's just been hectic, that's all. I'm sorry if I've been a little off." But her words didn't match her actions. If anything, things only got worse after that conversation. She became more secretive, more elusive. I'd catch her texting late at night, her screen tilted away from me. When I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd shrug and say, "Just a coworker." I started to feel like a stranger in my own marriage. The woman who had once been my best friend, my confidant, now felt like a puzzle I couldn't solve. And no matter how hard I tried, the pieces just didn't fit. Then there were the whispers. Friends and coworkers who'd attended our wedding started to drop subtle hints that something might be amiss. "Is Sarah okay?" they'd ask. "She seems distracted lately." At first, I dismissed their concerns, chalking it up to the stress of adjusting to married life. But the more I heard it, the harder it became to ignore. The breaking point came one Friday evening. Sarah had told me she'd be working late again, so I decided to surprise her with dinner at her office. I spent hours preparing her favorite meal, packing it up neatly and driving to her building. But when I arrived, her desk was empty. The cleaning crew was already making their rounds, and there was no sign of Sarah or her team. "Excuse me," I said to one of the janitors. "Have you seen Sarah? She said she'd be working late tonight." The man frowned, shaking his head. "Most of the staff left hours ago," he said. "The office has been quiet all evening." I felt the air leave my lungs. My hands trembled as I called her, my mind racing with possibilities. When she answered, her voice was calm, almost too calm. "Hey," she said. "What's up? Where are you?" I asked, my voice tight. "At work," she replied without missing a beat. "Why?" "I'm at your office," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You're not here." There was a pause, just long enough to confirm what I already knew. I stepped out for a bit," she said finally. "I'll be back soon." But she didn't come back soon. In fact, she didn't come home at all that night. And as I sat alone in our apartment, the doubt that had been gnawing at me for months finally erupted into a full-blown storm. Something was wrong. Deeply, irreparably wrong. I just didn't know how bad it was yet. I didn't sleep that night. My mind replayed the conversation with Sarah over and over again, dissecting every word, every pause. Where was she? Why had she lied? And more importantly, why did I still want to believe her? The next morning, Sarah walked in just after sunrise. Her hair was slightly disheveled, her makeup smudged. She looked like someone who'd been up all night, but not at the office. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the untouched dinner from the night before still sitting on the counter. She froze when she saw me, her keys dangling from her fingers. "Hey," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and forced nonchalance. "You're up early." I didn't reply immediately. I just looked at her, trying to find some trace of the woman I thought I knew. "Where were you, Sarah?" I finally asked, my voice calm but firm. She hesitated, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. "I told you," she said. "I had to step out for a bit. I ended up crashing at a coworker's place. It was late, and I didn't want to wake you." "Which coworker?" I asked, leaning forward slightly. "What's their name?" She blinked, caught off guard by the directness of my question. "Does it matter?" she said, her tone defensive. "I'm sorry I didn't call. I didn't think it would be a big deal." "It is a big deal," I said, my voice rising slightly. "You lied to me, Sarah. You said you were at work, but you weren't. Why would you lie about that?" "I'm not lying," she snapped, her voice suddenly sharp. "Why are you making this into something it's not?" I stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't the Sarah I knew. The woman standing in front of me was a stranger, someone I couldn't trust. "I just want the truth," I said quietly. "If something's going on, tell me. Please." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Nothing's going on," she said, her voice softer now. "I'm just stressed. Work has been crazy, and I've been feeling overwhelmed. I'm sorry if I've been distant. I'll try to do better, okay?" I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But the seed of doubt had already taken root, and no amount of apologies could make it go away. Over the next few weeks, I tried to put her words to the test. I gave her space, hoping that she'd come back to me on her own. I told myself that maybe I was overreacting, that maybe she really was just stressed. But her behavior didn't change. If anything, it got worse. She started spending more and more time away from home, always with some excuse about work or networking events. Her phone was practically glued to her hand, and she'd become increasingly secretive about who she was talking to. Whenever I'd ask, she'd brush me off with a vague, "Just a friend," or, "It's not important." I began to feel like a ghost in my own marriage. The woman who had once been my partner, my confidant, now felt like a stranger. And no matter how hard I tried to reach her, she kept slipping further and further away. One evening, while Sarah was out, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I picked up her laptop. It wasn't locked, and my hands trembled as I opened her email. I told myself I was just looking for answers, that I deserved to know the truth. But as I scrolled through her inbox, I found nothing out of the ordinary. Work emails, newsletters, receipts. Nothing incriminating. Then I noticed a folder labeled Personal. My heart pounded as I clicked on it. Inside were dozens of emails, all from the same address. The sender's name was Mark. I opened the most recent email, my stomach churning with dread. It was short but devastating. Hey babe. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. Can't wait to see you again. Love, Mark. My vision blurred as I stared at the screen. The words felt like a physical blow, knocking the air out of my lungs. I clicked on another email, and another, each one more damning than the last. They talked about secret meetups, stolen moments, and a connection that felt electric. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking. The room spun around me as the reality of what I'd just discovered sank in. Sarah was cheating on me. She had been for months, maybe longer. And she'd lied to my face every step of the way. When Sarah came home that night, I was waiting for her. She walked in, her smile faltering when she saw the look on my face. We need to talk, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay. What's going on? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Who's Mark? Her eyes widened, and for a moment she looked genuinely shocked. But then her expression hardened. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, crossing her arms. Don't lie to me, I said, my voice rising. I saw the emails, Sarah. I know everything. She stared at me, her face pale. For a moment, I thought she might come clean. But instead, she shook her head. You had no right to go through my stuff, she said, her voice cold. And you had no right to cheat on me. I shot back. I trusted you, Sarah. I gave you everything. How could you do this? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I sat there, stunned, as the sound of her footsteps faded away. In that moment, I realized that the woman I had married, the woman I had built my life around, was gone. And in her place was someone I didn't recognize, someone who had shattered my trust and my heart in one fell swoop. The days following Sarah's silent retreat were some of the loneliest of my life. Our home, once filled with laughter and shared moments, now echoed with tension and unspoken words. She avoided me, retreating to the guest room under the pretense of needing space. I, too, retreated, not physically, but emotionally. My mind churned, consumed by questions that had no satisfying answers. Why? Why had she done it? Why had she married me, knowing full well that she'd betrayed me even before our vows? And why, despite it all, did I still crave an explanation? One evening, after another day of avoidance, I decided I couldn't endure the silence any longer. I needed answers, closure, anything to make sense of the chaos that had consumed my life. I found Sarah in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone with a glass of wine in hand. She looked up as I entered, her expression unreadable. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. She sighed, setting her phone down. I don't want to do this right now. Well, I do, I said firmly. You owe me that much, at least. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she nodded, gesturing for me to sit. I remained standing. Why, Sarah? I asked, the weight of the question pressing down on my chest. Why did you do it? Why did you marry me if you were already seeing someone else? She looked away, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. I don't know, she said finally. It just happened. It just happened? I repeated, incredulous. You don't accidentally cheat on someone, Sarah. You don't accidentally carry on an affair and then stand in front of your family and friends and promise to be faithful. That takes intent. Her gaze snapped back to mine, a flicker of anger in her eyes. Do you think I wanted this? She said, her voice rising. Do you think I planned for this to happen? I don't know what to think, I said, my own voice matching hers. That's why I'm asking you. Help me understand, Sarah. Because right now, all I see is someone who lied to me, who betrayed me, and who's still refusing to take responsibility. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I'm sorry, okay? She said, her voice cracking. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I messed everything up. But I can't change what happened. No, you can't, I said, my tone colder now. But you can tell me the truth. Did you ever love me? Or was this all just a lie? Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I thought I saw a glimmer of the woman I'd fallen in love with. I did love you, she said softly. I still do. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. And I don't know how to find my way back. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Part of me wanted to believe her, to hold on to the hope that there was still something worth saving. But another part, the part that had been shattered by her betrayal, couldn't ignore the reality of what she'd done. It's too late for that, I said quietly. You've made your choice, Sarah. And now I have to make mine. The next morning, I began the process of untangling our lives. I contacted a lawyer, explained the situation, and started the paperwork for a divorce. It was one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made, but I knew it was the right one. I couldn't live in the shadow of her betrayal, constantly questioning her every move. I deserved better. Sarah didn't fight me on the divorce. In fact, she seemed almost relieved, as though the weight of her lies had finally become too much to bear. She moved out a week later, taking only the essentials. Watching her leave was like watching a chapter of my life close, one that I'd once believed would be my happily ever after. But the end of our marriage wasn't the end of the pain. In the weeks that followed, I grappled with a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, disbelief. I questioned everything: myself, our relationship, even my ability to trust again. Friends and family rallied around me, offering support and reassurance. You'll get through this, they said. You're stronger than you think. But in the quiet moments, when it was just me and the empty apartment, I felt anything but strong. One evening, as I was packing up some of Sarah's remaining belongings, I found an old photo album tucked away in the back of a closet. It was from our early days together, filled with pictures of vacations, holidays, and ordinary moments that had felt extraordinary at the time. I flipped through the pages, a lump forming in my throat as I saw the smiles, the laughter, the love that had once been so real. But as I closed the album, I realized something. Those moments, as beautiful as they were, didn't define me. They were a part of my story, yes, but they weren't the whole story. There was still so much ahead of me, so much I had yet to experience and discover. The first step toward healing was letting go. Letting go of the anger, the bitterness, and the what-ifs. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. But little by little, I began to rebuild. I focused on my work, my hobbies, and my relationships with the people who truly cared about me. And slowly, the pain began to fade. It didn't disappear entirely. I don't think it ever will. But it became a part of me, a reminder of what I'd endured and how far I'd come. Looking back now, I see that chapter of my life for what it was, a painful but necessary lesson. It taught me the importance of self-worth, the power of resilience, and the value of authenticity. And while I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone, I'm grateful for the growth it brought me. Because in the end, betrayal didn't define me. It shaped me. And from those broken pieces, I built something stronger. In the weeks following Sarah's departure, I found myself navigating an unfamiliar landscape of solitude. The home we had shared felt like a hollow shell, filled with echoes of a life I no longer recognized. But amidst the silence, a new sense of clarity began to emerge. I realized that while Sarah's betrayal had broken my heart, it had not broken me. The first step in reclaiming my life was confronting the memories. I boxed up the remnants of our relationship: photos, mementos, the little notes she used to leave for me on the fridge. Each item was a reminder of what I thought we had, and letting go of them felt like shedding a second skin. I donated some of our shared possessions, finding a strange sense of catharsis in giving them a new purpose. The space left behind wasn't just physical, it was emotional, too. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into projects, finding solace in the structure and purpose they provided. My colleagues noticed the change. "You've been on fire lately," one of them said during a team meeting. I nodded, grateful for the distraction. But it wasn't just about staying busy. It was about rediscovering the parts of myself that had been buried under the weight of my failed marriage. Outside of work, I began to reconnect with old friends. People I'd unintentionally drifted away from during my years with Sarah. "It's good to have you back," my best friend Mike said over beers one evening. "The real you." His words stuck with me. Had I really lost myself in the relationship? The answer, I realized, was yes. But now, I had the chance to find myself again. Therapy was another step in the healing process. I'd never been one to open up to strangers, but sitting in that quiet office, with someone who listened without judgment, was transformative. My therapist helped me unpack the layers of pain and betrayal, guiding me toward understanding and, eventually, acceptance. "You're allowed to feel angry," she said during one session. "You're allowed to grieve. But don't let those feelings define you. You have the power to decide what comes next." Her words became a mantra of sorts. Whenever the anger threatened to consume me or the sadness pulled me under, I reminded myself that I had a choice. I could dwell on the past, or I could focus on the future. As the months passed, I started to explore new hobbies. Photography, something I dabbled in years ago, became a passion. I spent weekends wandering through parks and city streets, capturing moments of beauty and stillness. It was therapeutic, a reminder that the world was still full of wonder, even when life felt chaotic. Traveling also became a form of escape and renewal. I took a solo trip to Colorado, hiking through the Rockies and marveling at the sheer vastness of the landscape. Standing on a mountain peak, with the wind whipping around me and the sun breaking through the clouds, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. It was as if the weight of everything I'd been carrying had finally lifted. One day, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled across a post about a local support group for people who'd experienced infidelity. I hesitated at first. The idea of sharing my story with strangers felt daunting. But something pushed me to attend, and I'm glad I did. Hearing others' experiences, and realizing I wasn't alone, was profoundly healing. The group became a source of strength, a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, life goes on. It was through the group that I met Claire. She had a warm smile and a quiet strength that drew me in. Over time, our conversations extended beyond the meetings, and we began to see each other outside of the group. There was no rush, no pressure. Just two people who understood what it meant to rebuild from the ground up. Claire wasn't a replacement for what I'd lost, she was something entirely new. A reminder that love, when it's real and true, doesn't hurt. It heals. Looking back now, I can see that Sarah's betrayal, as devastating as it was, became a turning point in my life. It forced me to confront not only the flaws in our relationship but also the parts of myself that I'd neglected. It taught me resilience, self-worth, and the importance of setting boundaries. There are still moments when the memories creep in, uninvited. But they no longer hold the same power over me. They're just that, memories. Pieces of a past that shaped me but do not define me. Today, I'm in a better place. My life isn't perfect, but it's mine. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the future. Because I've learned that even in the wake of betrayal, there is hope. There is growth. And there is the promise of something better just beyond the horizon. Leave a comment with your thoughts on the story. And subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new interesting stories. See you soon.